One of the most challenging is the dark night of the soul because men especially don't reach out for help. That's why we see the suicide rate crazy, especially amongst men, because they don't bond or reach out for help the way that women do.
Hello and welcome to Life by Design, where we go deeper into the conversations that change how you see yourself, your relationships, and the life you're intentionally building. I'm Kate Vandenbosch, your host, and today we're going deeper with Erika Elmuts. Erika has spent over 2 decades at the intersection of ancient wisdom, healing, and modern transformation. She's a Harvard-educated naturopath, author, and speaker who has guided thousands of clients across the globe through some of the most profound shifts of their lives. Her newest book just came out. It's called The Reclamation, The 6 Stages of the Masculine Awakening, and it's the subject of today's conversation. Today we are talking about the masculine, and probably from a very different perspective than you're used to. Stay tuned as we unpack what a masculine awakening actually is and the 6 stages that map it out. Why most men don't even know they're in one, but can definitely feel it, and what you can do and what not to do when the man in your life is going through it. We also talk about how women are also running their own distorted masculine patterns and the consequences, as well as what the light at the end of the awakening tunnel is.
Most
Hi, Erika. Welcome. So happy that you're here. Congratulations on your new book, The
Thank
Reclamation,
you.
The 6 Stages of the Masculine Awakening. Very well done. Does it feel
Thank
good?
you. I'm so glad to be here and to be with you to chat about all the things.
Nice. Yeah, I'm happy you're here too. So, but for those of you who don't know Erika or don't know the work that she's done, just talk a little bit about the path that's led you to doing this work, because it's been a meandering one, a bit like mine, I think.
Isn't it always? The best way I would describe it is divinely orchestrated.
Of course.
I started out in the way a lot of people do, go to college, get a degree, go get a good job, ended up getting a master's degree. Like I did all the things. And I was hit with a health crisis in my mid 20s, where overnight I was diagnosed with an incurable disease that kind of turned my life around. I was told I'd be a sick person the rest of my life. And long story short, a few years later, I was cured of this incurable disease in less than an hour.
Wow.
And I knew my life changed that day. I knew I had been put on that path for a reason. And when that happened to me, I embarked on an entire journey to figure out how on earth that's possible, given what we're told. And so the last 25, about 20 years now, about a little more than 25 since the healing, but been off of all meds and haven't had a recurrence of the disease. And I knew it was part of my passion and my purpose here is to help give people the understanding of what's possible. You can heal, you can become better, you can change your life in an instant if you choose to. And learning how to work with the universe and everything that we have available to us.
Nice, nice, nice. So, if you were just broadly, what kind of healing was that? We're thinking energetic. Was energy
Yes,
healing?
it was a
Yeah.
form of energy healing that removed the imprint of a specific emotion on my body. My body was
Got it.
storing what that meant in my journey, which is what resulted in the physical disease.
Hmm.
That once that was released, my body no longer had to express the physical disease because the physical disease is a signal of an imbalance somewhere in your energy system.
Hmm. As I remember, the whole premise of osteopathy and naturopathic osteopathy, which is what I studied, you're a naturopath too, is that the body can heal itself. We just need to get out of its own way, right? That's what
Hmm.
the therapist or an osteopath will do, a naturopath will do, is actually remove the obstacles to your own healing. So yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. So our bodies are that expression of our emotional and energetic fields too, you know. So then talk to
Definitely.
me, then how does that lead you to studying the divine masculine?
Well, who knew that I would be talking about this? If you had said this to me however many years ago, like you're going to be on talking about this, you're going to write a book about it, I would have
Mhm.
I would have been like, no way, why would I be doing that? But through my journey I've been spending basically the best part of basically 20 years working with thousands of clients at all different stages. At first, when I started out, it was a lot of naturopathic work. nutrition and supporting the body energetically. And very quickly, people came to me for physical ailments, and I knew and understood that the emotional component of disease. And so through that, I spent literally 20 years in various different capacities, learning all different modalities and really dialing in on how do we heal physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And so part of that work, years later, did lead me to doing a lot of, I started a YouTube channel for fun because I loved, doing tarot and oracle readings for myself and my friends. And I literally threw a video up, and the next thing you knew, I began doing it full time. So I've worked with over 2,000 personal clients since that time. And in that journey, a lot of the work was based in soul growth of masculine energy, which we all have as part of our polarity. We are, regardless of our gender. And so I got a really interesting perspective into the collective masculine, sacred masculine template, and how to get the things out of the way so we could express that within ourselves and in our relationships. And a lot of it started with people wanting to understand themselves and their existing relationships with people.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely. I love that. And well, that's how I know you. I found your YouTube channel. We've known each other for a really long time. So I've been able to experience a lot of your own personal journey through this too. And this is literally hands-on experience that you've had working with this, this energy. So the Reclamation talks about the 6 stages of a masculine awakening. Before
mhm.
we dive further into that, let's go a little bit more high level and just talk about what is masculine and feminine energy first, and then what is the definition or your definition of a divine masculine awakening.
So, when someone asks, like, what is a masculine awakening, I start with the conversation of, well, what is masculine in the
Mhm.
first place, right? We have to define what that is. And masculine energy is the part of us that we all have that is the doer, the one that has to tell it, the one that makes things happen, the one that is the protector and the provider for ourselves and our own lives. So when we have to get up and go to work and make ends meet, that's our masculine energy having to step in and do
Mhm.
and perform. And feminine energy on the other side, the feminine is the softer side, the nurturing side. It's like the masculine is the doer, the feminine is the beer. Like she just is. She's in her receptive mode. So, we see yin yang, they're just opposite, but they're together, they're whole. And so the feminine side is our nurturing side, our emotional side, our intuitive side. And we all have aspects and combinations of these that we have to express at any time. And so a masculine awakening is when we are confronted with something in our lives. Most of the time, it's something big that you can't ignore. And sometimes it's more gradual. But the awakening is when we realize where the way we've been conditioned in our masculine energy isn't working for us anymore. We become too protective of our hearts. We become
Mhm.
too in our egos to succeed and compete. I mean, that's what we've been conditioned in. Our whole society is based in distorted masculine conditioning, which is ego, greed, like I got to win, so you lose. And so the awakening is where we realize that that's not working for us. And then we begin the inner journey to change it.
So the understanding is you always have both, right? And there are just one is more coming to the front or the forefront of expression versus disappearing. And so, I mean, the divine feminine or feminine energy is a huge topic, and a lot of different circles. It's even becoming very mainstream as a conversation topic. And so it's really refreshing to be able to talk about the counterpart, the masculine energy, because again, we all have that. And we all have masculine people in our lives too. And so this understanding of understanding them better actually also helps us understand ourselves better and vice versa. When we understand our inner masculine, we can have more compassion for our outer masculines, our other masculines.
Yeah, the masculine embodied in our
Mm-hmm.
lives, right?
I remember you saying, um, I always remember it this way. It's almost like the feminine intuition gives the orders and the masculine delivers them. It's that sense of working together as a teamwork when they're in a healthy balance and not, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, is that not in that toxic expression of each of them.
Yeah,
So, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the best way I describe the inner masculine and feminine dynamic, which a lot of people can relate to this, is because I grew up with a lot, my distorted masculine energy was super strong. I mean, competitive athlete,
Yeah.
Ivy League school, like master's degree, business. Like I was so in my masculine energy, and it didn't serve me very well personally. So I
Mhm.
really unwound that for myself. But the example I like to give is it's the inner dialogue you have when you've got something to do and your body's just telling you, you know what, it's time to rest. Like you're tired. Do you really need to do that? That's your inner feminine kind of poking the masculine side of you going, you know, you need some rest. You're going to burn out if you don't stop. And the inner masculine is saying, no, I got to
Yeah.
perform, I got to do this. And so often that dialogue is the inner dialogue is between your own masculine and feminine. Your intuition is telling you, you know, got to nurture yourself and have a balance.
Hmm.
And the masculine's either going to listen to the feminine side or say, no, screw it, I gotta like perform, I gotta do. And that's where people have choice.
Right.
But that's the easiest way that I like to give as an example of how many of you can relate to where you
Hmm.
gotta rest. And I've always been guilty of burnout. And it was very hard for me to learn to take a nap in the middle of the day, which I
Yeah.
can do because I work for myself.
Hmm.
But that was very hard because I felt guilty. I felt like
Hmm.
I should be doing something. And instead, my job was to nurture self because I couldn't perform if I didn't take a rest.
I mean, that's an entirely completely different conversation talking about the feminine energy and when it gets ignored and the consequences of ignoring that
Yeah.
as and again, just being it's out of balance. What we're talking about is actually are things in a healthy, natural balance with each other because they're both necessary and needed at times, and vice versa when um if you're trying to make a decision, they can counter that point with feeling hesitant, not sure. The masculine part of you is the one that goes, we're doing this. All right, come on, buck up. We've got this. I've got your back. Let's go. Because your inner, that feminine side of you knows that it's the right thing to do. She's not saying, putting on the brakes, saying, I don't want to do this. This scares me. She's saying, I'm unsure. I don't know what to do, but I know this is the right thing to do. And that
Yeah.
masculine energy can step in and then actually take that driving seat and get the ball rolling forward. So again, it works both ways. And
Mhm.
for me personally, I have followed exactly the same competitive sports, grade A
Yep.
student, drive, drive, drive. But we grew up in a world where we were rewarded for winning. We were rewarded for competing. That even in my grade school, I remember we were graded on the curve, which I don't think they do anymore. And they didn't do that in the UK when I moved over there. But talking about just being up against your peers and that whole competition always of just stepping over one person to get a little bit further ahead. And
Yeah.
that's where, that a lot of that identity comes from when we're rewarded and literally promoted for that ability to compete and to push
Mhm.
somebody else down underneath us. So
Mhm.
as a woman who's been working with men for, over 20 plus years in this arena, what is your perspective on this and how is it different for the men out there from what they're hearing from other men on masculinity, for instance?
So this is an interesting question because, of course, obviously, I'm a woman who's written a book about masculine awakening, and my perspective on that is that of the someone who has witnessed the masculine awakening in both men and women for 20 years. Whether it's coming to me for a health crisis and they're having to change their life, they're having to face, make, how they got there, what changes are they going to make to get better, what are they willing to do? I mean, that's all part of an awakening. So,
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of, and being a woman, because I am more the sacred feminine, we have access to wisdom and to like realms of intuition that men just don't as much. They have a feminine side. Some are highly intuitive, and that's their inner feminine energy. But typically, the way the team work works is the feminine shares the wisdom and the insights to that gut feeling. I don't know if I feel good about this. I'm not. Be careful of that person. I don't really trust them. So when the masculine and the feminine team up, it's really, really powerful. So what I did is work with a lot of clients where I was channeling the sacred masculine through the healing work I was doing with people. So it's almost like I became a spokesperson for the sacred masculine energy.
Hmm.
And I learned a lot about myself in the process. And so my perspective being different from men, men have been they've lived the experience themselves. I don't claim to be a man. I don't claim to know what a man goes through personally,
Hmm.
other than having listened to many of them cry cry to me and explain what's gone on and heal and have breakthroughs. So I've heard it from them firsthand, but I'm not a man. But I have a feminine perspective where I'm holding up a mirror to them for their gifts and their brilliance that often they don't see about themselves, and
Hmm.
society, quite frankly, doesn't reflect it back to them either. Like you said, society will reward competitiveness and achievement and not who they are for their hearts. So
Hmm.
men have huge hearts and they've just not been given the opportunity to really express them in a way that still retains their masculine energy. So the perspective is it's like I'm the cheerleader for the men and holding up a mirror for things they don't see, and I'm honoring their journey because it's different from ours.
Hmm.
It's different, but it's also we do go through similar aspects of it with our own masculine awakening.
So
I don't
is
know if
this
that
some?
makes sense how I explained it, but
Yeah,
it's
no,
kind of a larger
absolutely.
concept.
And it reminds me, so I've studied a lot of the work of Alison Armstrong, and she talks about the key psychological developments that men go through. And her framework, applies to all men. They just go through the stages at different times, and sometimes they'll cycle back and forward, but it applies to understanding all men. Um,
Mhm.
do all men, let's start there, and we'll talk about our inner masculine for women in a second, but let's just talk about men because we all have really important men in our lives. And I think it's important for all of us. If you're here, you're interested in having a healthy life by design, which also includes your relationships. And so understanding that person you're in a relationship with, for me, is one of the key components of a healthy, balanced relationship. So is this something that happens to all men?
My answer to that is all men have the opportunity to go through an awakening. Um, they will be presented with something or a series of things that will force them to either look in the mirror and see things that they're needing to notice so they can shift. Um, and they have a choice to address it or they have a choice to run away. I mean, one of the stages in
Mm.
the 6 stages is called separation, and some people will stay in separation forever and never actually deal with it. They'll keep going with their lives, they'll ignore it, they'll suppress. So, my answer is I believe that everybody has the opportunity for an awakening, but not all will actually experience a full
Mhm.
6 stages. And they make, even with the 6 stages I talk about in the book, where they do go back and forth, and you can go
Mhm.
back in, and, it's like the stages of grief, right? There's multiple
Mhm.
stages you
Mhm.
can go back. So, no, not everyone will actually go through one, but I believe they all have an opportunity.
So, from your experience, like, how do men know that they're even in this experience? Like, what are they? What are the practical, uh, I guess, signs of somebody of going through this journey?
So there's two groups I want to touch on briefly. Number one is the classic midlife crisis.
Hmm.
You've kind of done your life, you're where you're at, and you're sitting there going, am I really happy? What do I want for the rest of my life? And so that's one of the ways that a lot of times the awakening opportunity happens is, hey, I'm halfway through my life. And what I thought, I had all
Hmm.
this time, and now what do I want to do with it? Do I want to keep doing this in my life, or do I want to change things? Am I really happy? Is it what I thought I would do? So men fitting into the category of the classic midlife crisis are one group. But what's really interesting is through writing this book and having conversations with younger men, is the way I would define how a man would know is if they're searching for more meaning in their life. I've spoken with men in their 20s who, of course,
Really?
they're asking me what book I'm writing, and I tell them, and I think it's for older, and very much they're very interested because they're also seeking more meaning. Where do they
Hmm.
feel empty? Where do they feel a lack of purpose? And so those are some of the signs. If you sort of feel this like flatness, if you feel this like, yeah, I'm fine, life looks good from the outside, but like, am I really fulfilled? Do I want another 40 years of this,
Hmm.
or is there something else? So there's like this pull elsewhere. But the third group is you have a major crisis.
Right.
You get a health diagnosis. Suddenly, you're started a company and the company folds and you're financially stressed. Maybe you meet somebody romantically who blows your mind and you don't know why, and they break open your heart for the first time ever. So the signs are you don't stop thinking about it, and as much as you try to ignore it, the universe keeps knocking, going, you got to pay attention to this.
Hmm.
So if it can be drastic and it can be more gradual, a little bit more like a niggle that just doesn't go away. It's really different for everybody.
So it almost feels like you go into the state of becoming the caterpillar turning into the butterfly in the cocoon, but getting halfway in and going, no, I don't want to finish this now, and just staying in that constantly stuck, very uncomfortable space. And so,
Hmm.
what is if we're looking to get them through the process, because I'm assuming we want to go through all 6 stages, right? That's why there's 6 of them, and it's to actually,
Hmm.
if you've started, let's finish it. What
Yeah.
can, what does somebody from the outside, what are the signs that they're possibly seeing in the masculines around them?
Well, this is what's interesting because a lot of times it may be hard to see. For example, like if we're talking about a romantic relationship, but we may have family members,
Mm-hmm.
siblings, really close friends. I've seen it a lot in the people around me. Just they a lot of times the men suffer in silence. This is why I wrote the book, because
Mm-hmm.
men process differently. They want the information and they don't want to be told what to do. I don't tell anybody how to do anything in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I'm providing a framework that then once the men like understand what they're going through, then they can navigate through it. They're brilliant at when they see the map, they know what to do. So it's from the outside, it can be hard to spot,
Right.
but the obvious things are like, distance, quiet, not talking as much. And a lot of times because of the feminine intuition, we'll sense something's going on and we will try to get it out of them.
Mm-hmm.
We'll ask them. We're going to start getting a little anxious because we know something's going on. They're not talking about it. And then it causes the dynamic to likely go through a little hiccup there because
Mm-hmm.
the feminine always wants to nurture and to care, but the
Right.
masculine often needs to process alone.
And they're not going to be necessarily able to put words around what they're going through because they don't know what they're going through, right?
Not
And that's again part
exactly.
of why this is so important, is to put these tools in the hands of the men so they can support themselves, but also support the support system around them, helping them through it too, as as painlessly and smoothly as possible. Um,
So
what
how have you seen that play out in
well,
your
my
friendships
my
or
newly married status. So it's interesting that I think that's one of the key things to note, is that there's no age around it, because it would be really easy to fall into an assumption pattern, right? Well, he's 50, midlife crisis, his Saturn's returning or whatever, blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
Um, that's not necessarily fair and that's not supportive. And so I think uh, what I would what I would say is all of the things that you're saying, even when I know better, it's hard to do better in the situation again, unless there's this
So
conscious,
true.
like the intellect has to go, hey, remember that thing you read? Remember that thing that Erika said? Remember that's what's happening right now. And so having again a framework and um to hook into, to actually go back and refer to when you're in a heightened emotional state yourself, I think is crucially important. Um, I always want to fix. That's still my natural tendency. And so I invariably, as as a coach who works with clients,
Yeah.
it's to it's it's the conditioning around and discipline around actually giving somebody that space to go through their own process themselves, but holding it for them with an understanding of, this is normal, this is what you can expect, this is what's going to be on the other side. I've worked with other
Hmm.
people that are doing this. And so Um, it's first of all, from as a female in the situation, I would say learning to control yourself first rather than trying to fix their situation is probably the number one factor here. And so
Hmm.
the question I would then have around that is somebody in, a relationship, in a very close relationship, what is the best way to, well, two things. There's two questions I have actually. Where is one of the stages of the six that you find most men tend to get stuck and spiral or spin?
I would it, spiraling and spinning or getting stuck. I would say
Or what if it's not that? Well, how does a man experience stuckness? What stops that evolution to that next stage of development?
part of what keeps people stuck is not knowing that there's other stages.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they feel like it's this is how it's always going to be. Whereas, for example, the dark night of the soul is step three of the six, and that's the most challenging. And I find especially with men because it's where everything just crashes down, and it's like their heart gets burst open for the first time, and they become overwhelmed with their emotions. It's kind of like imagine living your life having walled off your heart. You know, men are very much in their head and women are more in the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And society and men have had to, suppress the emotions because, you can't go out into battle and be crying all the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
you do, that's correct masculine energy, but it's sometimes to the extreme. And so during the dark night of the soul, men can just like break open completely and it feels like everything is shattering around them, everything about themselves, what they think about themselves, the world, whatever it can
Mm-hmm.
be. And so a lot of times one of the most challenging is the dark night of the soul because men especially don't reach out for help.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we see the suicide rate crazy, especially amongst men, because they don't bond or reach out for help the way that women do. But what causes people to get stuck is when they feel that they don't know where you're going. Like you imagine being on a journey and you don't even know there's not even a path to take. So you just stay where you are because you could go any direction.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know there's the next town is 5 miles away and then the
Right.
next one is 10 miles after that, just get to the next town.
You can pee in 5 miles. Keep going.
Yeah, and to have that vision, right?
Yeah.
It's like I was that the awakening journey is kind of a little bit like imagine running a marathon and you're prepared for 26.2 miles. You pace yourself. There's the markers along the way. You're
Mm-hmm.
running the marathon. You're like, okay, 10 miles to go, 10 miles to go. And then right at the very end, it says, sorry, you're not done yet.
Yeah.
But then there's no end marker. You don't know if you're going to go 40 miles or 100 miles.
Yeah. Just keep
And so you
going.
don't know how to pace yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but it's exhausting because it's a mental thing. So that's a lot of what the awakening journey is. You don't really know where the end point is. So that's what can make it extra challenging. So keep on going and keep on
Right.
going. Don't get stuck. But again, keeping people stuck is I think not knowing that there's something on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
having a vision for what it could be.
So, what was the best way that a partner could support somebody through this? Like, if I was to go and buy this book, which I will, I already have, um, how would I present it to him?
Well, that's a really good question because you might not need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially, I mean, how many times do women go and buy self-help books for guys, right?
Right.
Really, honey, I really want you to read this. Like, it's going to be
Piles of
so
them.
good if you read this.
Yeah.
Um, I would say you read it yourself. Have him see you reading it. Share some of the insights of
Mm-hmm.
what you're learning about either your own masculine energy or just your curiosity, but not to make it about him wanting, I wanting him to read it because part of what you mentioned earlier is a very important point I want to highlight here because it talks to this question is how to support them. Is there's a spectrum of feminine energy and masculine energy which is distorted towards the divine end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And so a balanced, healthy feminine, let's look at how the distorted feminine would approach that. I really want him to read it. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
buy it for him. I'm gonna nudge him. I'm gonna hint at it. I might make some comments. I might slip it into his briefcase, right? Like I'll just do anything. Leave it in the bathroom.
Right.
Like I'm just gonna like make, I really want him to read it because there underneath that is the distorted feminine energy of I need to help you so that I feel needed.
Hmm. Yep.
Because we are nurturers, but we can often be on the distorted side of where it ties into our wounding of we need, our value is based on what we can do for others.
Hmm.
So the way that a sacred feminine in her balance would support somebody is trust her masculine can figure it out.
That's an important one.
Be okay if he needs space. Know that you're there. Don't force him to talk if he's not wanting to. And to be like, focus on your own energy and know and trust that your masculine can figure it out in his own way, and that he's going to do it differently than we may have done it.
Hmm.
One of the hardest things is we
Hmm.
think someone's going to go through their awakening or their healing the way that we did. And when they have a different process. Every individual has a different process, never mind male or female.
So that
So
actually
being
kind
in
of
your balance.
segues into one of the, let's talk about myths and misconceptions, because one of the myths that I've heard is that a masculine will go through an awakening at lightning speed compared to a feminine.
In my experience, that tends to be true. It's not everybody, and they'll still go through the 6 stages. They may go back and forth for a little while.
Hmm.
And like I write in the book, I explain that it's not a linear process. And you're going to go loop back and forth. You're going to discover deeper layers, and that's fine. But I have found that um, the men do wake up faster when they know the lay of the land. That's why I wrote this, because I started doing videos on a small little YouTube channel just to help reach men specifically because they need a different languaging, they need a different approach. You
Hmm.
speak to them differently. And that YouTube channel, I got all these comments, and that's what drove me to write this book. Is all these women, like the men, were binge watching the videos because they were hearing the framework in a way they'd never heard it before.
Yeah.
And that's when I started drafting the book, because there was clearly a need for the information. Um, and so yes, I believe that men do go through it faster because it's just the way they're wired. Their brain's a little bit different.
More efficient than us overcomplicating women.
Yeah, what's that pastor? I'm sure you've seen the pastor who was like kind of a comedian and talked
Uh-huh.
about
The brain.
women's brains being bowls of spaghetti and the men's being compartment like boxes that he puts on the
Yeah.
shelf.
I can't, what is it?
I don't know his
The
name, but
nothing box. That's the one I always think about, right? He talks about the men have a nothing box that women can't understand, and there's all spaghetti, but men have a um they literally can think about nothing, and we as women cannot comprehend that whatsoever. Yeah, I'll look up the link and I'll put it in the show notes because that's actually a really good reminder of just
it's
how
funny.
very different we are just
And
biologically and
mhm.
neurologically, you know.
Yeah, the neurological side of it is important, but even just on a spiritual side, the way I like to describe it too is men are more earthed,
Mm.
right? They're more kind of 3D earthbound, and the feminine can be more spiritual up in the higher dimensions, and we tap into like all the possibilities. And so we need the groundedness of the
Hmm.
masculine to provide, to protect, and in the 3D, and the feminine, that's why we can go all over
Right.
spaghetti because we're over here and everything's connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and we need both. We
Hmm.
need both within, not only within ourselves, but within our relationships, whether they're romantic or other types
Hmm.
of relationships.
To be absolutely effective and healthy and balanced. What other misconceptions or myths, while we're talking about it, tend to come up around the area of masculinity, masculine energy, or bad advice, I should say? Let me throw that one in
Yeah.
there too.
So there were one of the important, the what I'm noticing in my clients, which is very very interesting, is one of the misconceptions is like I've done a lot of healing. I know all this about myself already. I've done a lot, and I've changed my life through the healing journey. And when people sometimes begin to deal with their masculine energy, especially women, um, they are blown away at how much it's still impacting their day to day, and they don't even know it. They don't even see it. And it is shocking to them when they get to that point of like, Well, I had never looked at it that way, and oh my God, that
Mhm.
just broke through something for me. So, especially a lot of successful women, them being in their masculine energy because we've conditioned ourselves.
Mhm.
That's how we've survived. Um, but the misconception is that I've done a lot of work and therefore, no, I already know that about myself. So assuming that you're done,
Mhm. That's a good one.
because it's like we clear out the stuff
Mhm.
that's obvious, but it's the deeper, more subconscious stuff that
Mhm.
doesn't come up right at the beginning of your journey. It can come out years later, decades later, even. And so the misconception is, oh, I've already dealt with all my big stuff. Well, sometimes the biggest stuff comes at the very end before a breakthrough.
Yeah, that's actually is one of the points that I made to talk to you about too. Is again, I'm not sure quite if it's as much with maybe your daughter's generation, but we were raised with the ideal of the fairy princess, right? We that was the ideal that we all grew up, questing for, being rescued from the tower by the prince, and it always ended with the happily ever after. And through our lifetimes and our generation, we've become very mistrustful of that, knowing that that's actually not how the fairy tale ends. And we swung to the other extreme of, I'll just do it myself. I don't need somebody to come and rescue me. I don't need a knight in shining armor to take me out of the tower. In fact, I'm going to build the tower myself and I'll rescue myself. And that's where it feels like we've swung so far in that direction
Hmm.
that it's then coming back into wanting that masculine counterpart and energy in our life again. So let's talk about women. Let's talk about, we've talked about what this looks like and feels like and how men experience it, but how do women experience their inner masculinity? And more importantly, what does toxic inner masculinity look like to you?
So I was thinking of a point before you asked the question about how we were raised, because I think that's important, and the pendulum being too
Mm-hmm.
much in one direction, because it speaks to your question as well. I think I did a video on TikTok recently where I talked about, Gen X women, for example. It wasn't many years before Gen X. We were born into a world where just a few years earlier, women were able to start voting. I mean,
Right.
people forget that. And so women's lib and women's rights and equal
Mm-hmm.
rights, let's go to work. And like, so when it was so much one direction, naturally things go the other direction. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, we're now coming more back into the balance. So the toxic masculinity, how that manifests and looks in our lives is when we are just driven, driven, driven. We overwork. We have to succeed. We don't let ourselves rest because we just go, go, go. We don't know where the end point is. So we can overdo it. We can burn ourselves out completely. Um, we can be completely closed off from our hearts. I can't tell you how many people, especially, they're like, well, I like the walls around my heart. They keep
Mm-hmm.
me from getting hurt.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, walls and boundaries are two different things. So
Mm-hmm.
when people have walls that you can't even connect with them emotionally, toxic masculinity is like I should say distorted. I don't like toxic masculinity like has its own.
That's a good point. Yeah, let's not
Yeah, I
use
like to
that.
use
Mm-hmm.
distorted because toxic masculinity is
Mm-hmm.
so overused
Mm-hmm.
and
That's a good distinction. You're right.
yeah, I think it's it's where we prioritize achievement over our well-being, over our happiness.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a balance, right? But that's where it's like, no, I'm just going to prioritize work. I got this work event that I need to go to or I want to go to, but my child is at home and really needs me and they're
Mm-hmm.
not doing that well and they really need their mom, for example. You asked a couple questions there. I'm trying to remember the second one.
Well, I was just saying, like, what is it? How does a woman know that she's running a distorted masculine pattern? And you've already started alluding to that. It's like, what are the consequences of that? And
I'll
why
tell you the
it
biggest one.
matters, right? Why it matters to address it. What are the biggest consequences?
I'll tell you the biggest one is they're having a hard time finding love.
Mhm.
They are successful, they're beautiful, they're accomplished, they're kind, they're wonderful people. But the biggest signal that you're putting out your masculine energy too much, whether it's distorted or
Mm-hmm.
usually it's more on the distorted side, is that it's hard to attract love or that or relationship
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because
definitely.
it's like you want it and you want like some of that's you said it earlier. So many women are like, we really want the masculine to come and hold us. We're
Mm-hmm.
tired of doing everything ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes, but when the masculine comes in, are you really going to allow him to guide and protect you, which
Yeah.
sometimes means you sit down and just let him lead you? Do you know how hard that is for so many women?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you're going to lead me? Like, I always joke when my clients, when they're starting a new relationship, like, midlife, a lot of them, is there's two men in the relationship. That's not going to
Mm-hmm.
work. The masculine's masculine energy and the feminine's masculine
Yeah.
energy.
You can be bros. You're not going to be
Yeah, and the
lovers.
feminine's
Yeah.
got to, like, when she's independent and single, she has to be very strong in
Mm-hmm.
her masculine energy. But so it's very hard for her to step down. So yeah, one of the signs is you're having a hard time attracting like a solid partnership is and there's many other reasons for this too, but that you
Yeah.
want it, but
That
you don't know
actually,
you're sending out that signal of masculine
right.
energy.
Again, we've been
Masculine men are
conditioned.
not attracted to masculine
Mm-hmm.
women.
And there's, a couple points that I want to raise around that. This is my personal opinion too. I am a huge proponent of loving relationships. And that doesn't mean sacrificing your integrity, sacrificing your independence, sacrificing your value and your worth to be codependently with someone else. I'm a huge proponent of an interdependent relationship, which
Hmm.
means being responsible for how you show up too, and being the best version and healed version of yourself as you enter into a holistic relationship. While you've been talking, there's actually 2 points that I would say with the growth cycle or the framework that I used for coaching my clients through the phases of their growth throughout every year. There are 2 phases which are actually directly opposite each other, and I'd never actually made this connection. There's the rebirth phase, which is very early on in your year,
Hmm.
which is all about self, and that's often where a lot of times the client will come in, and at that point of your year you're being asked to look at who you are, how you're showing up, your identity, how you're expressing your inner self in the outer world. And that's where, for me, the first time for a client to actually look, or for anybody to really examine, how balanced am I being right now? How much in my own authenticity and integrity and holistic, balanced, masculine, feminine energy am I showing up right now? Because then we go 6 months later, directly opposite is when that self enters into relationship with other in the tribe phase as you head through your receiving day. And again, that's where, if you're still highly masculine driven as a female and you're trying to come into a relationship with another highly driven masculine man, um, there's the clash. It's literally like two, I always think like elk, right? Or bison, like
Hmm.
just going head to head, or the mountain goats, right? When they're ramming each other. But one thing, and this is not easy. Let me just caveat that this is not easy for a woman in modern world to come to grips with this, because 2 things need to happen. And it reminds me of a client of mine. Her husband was in the army and he was away a lot. He was an officer in the army. So he was stationed away. She had 2 young kids. And when he's gone, she has to be mother and father. She has to be man and woman in the house. She had to take the garbage out. She had to do the repairs on the car. If there was a flat tire, she took care of it. If there was a light bulb need changing, whatever, right? There's a very stereotypical masculine jobs, but you get my point. And he'd then come home and there would be like friction because he wants to step back into that stereotypical
Hmm.
classic traditional masculine role or energetic masculine role. And if she wasn't conscious, she didn't step back. And that's very hard because, again, I've been there myself too. Your feminine almost relaxes at this point. We're like, oh, he's here, and I can go back to being soft and lose track of time and be intuitive and creative. And it's almost a jolt to the system when suddenly that energy is then gone because he goes off to
Yeah.
get stationed again, and she has to reconfigure. So not by any means downplaying how easy this is. It's not just a case of, oh, I'm going to just be more feminine now. And so he can be more
No.
masculine. Like our world is actually not, it's not designed for us to live naturally that way. And that's part of why these life by design conversations are so important because you have to consciously be aware of what's happening so you can consciously make different decisions.
So do you find when you're going through the soul, the growth cycle with your clients and they get to that rebirth phase where they're having to look at themselves, do you find it difficult for them to see stuff in during that you see? Because that's very hard to recognize the unconscious.
I think the biggest draw is people wanting a relationship, right? That's I would say the biggest draw. The most obvious path is somebody craving a relationship. And not everybody comes to work with me craving a relationship, but predominantly they do. And again, I spend a lot of my time championing and advocating the great virtues of men because that's
Mhm.
something I truly believe in. And I think we are. I actually had a client ask me the other way. She said, "Why are you such a big fan of this?" It's like, because they make us better people. And anything that makes me a better version of myself, I'm a huge fan of.
Mhm.
Because when I'm better, he's better, and the ripple effect out into the world is better. Everybody's better. Um, and you learn and grow under literally a very condensed microscopic situation where you can't hide from your stuff. You have to turn and face it if you want to be in a healthy relationship. So
I
when
think
they,
it's interesting though when women like, especially if they've been single for a long
Mhm,
time, they're successful, independent, like they get the older they get, the more they're like, I don't know if I even want
mhm,
like I want to be in a relationship, but I don't even know if I want to live with them. I'm so
yeah,
used to my patterns and
yeah.
how I do things and
I was there too. I lived by myself for 10 years and there it's interesting if we just want to take a sidestep. What I've noticed is that there's actually a an evolutionary three phase thing that most clients will go through, females, is that it's the heartbreak phase, the reaction phase, the walls up phase, right? There's never and for me this is it's an important phase. Again, it's just whether you stay there or not. So the walls go up so that you can actually do some healing, reflection, looking at what decisions did I make? How did I contribute to that situation? What do I want differently next time? How do I need to grow? And then the walls need to start coming down so you can start testing that in the world outside. But that's what the second phase is. Hmm, maybe maybe I do want a relationship, but I don't know. I can't. There's too many things I'm going to have to sacrifice, compromise. I really like myself because they started liking themselves again. And I think that's the key thing
that's a
is that they
key
have
point.
fallen back in love with themselves and they don't want to lose that.
Mm-hmm.
The third phase is when you're so in love with yourself that you realize you have enough overspill and you have really healthy energetic boundaries that are not going to be trampled on again because you've learned. So going from one heartbreak right into another is not necessarily a healthy pattern. There I do think that that three phase arc is, I've seen it every time,
Mm-hmm.
of knowing when they start, one of the things they'll start recognizing other people's relationships and going, oh, that was sweet when I loved how he did that, he held the car door for her, he carried her bags, that was really sweet, versus the, I don't want a man anywhere near me, in my relationship. So we're talking about like identity. It depends on what phase they're in, and going through the cycle, it depends on how they're feeling about themselves, how they're feeling about is it might be that year that they cycle through, they're just doing the work on healing themselves, healing their heartbreak, understanding what happened, so that they can reframe it and step forward into a different version of themselves, then falling in love with themselves, independent, getting out there, traveling, liking themselves. And then the third phase is going to usually be, what do I need to do? How do I need to grow? And who do I need to become this year so that I am attracting that equal and opposite counterpart into my energetic being?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So this is great, fascinating. As always, I could talk for many more hours about this. If you were to give both men and women one, maybe two pieces of advice, what would it be?
Can you narrow it down? Topic area. Oh gosh, oh gosh. I mean,
All right, well, I'll narrow it down for you.
you know what yeah,
If
thank
they
you.
find themselves starting to feel like they're in the early stages of an awakening, something shifting, something changing, what's that? What's the biggest piece of advice you can give somebody?
Remember that things are not happening to you, they're happening for you. I think that's probably the nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Is understand that everything we experience is an opportunity for growth and breakthroughs that bring us ultimately to more happiness, even the really painful experiences. It's what we do with them, it's how we process through them, and the lessons we learn through um, that are all going to bring us to more alignment with ourselves. And we are energetic beings, and when we are in alignment, we send a stronger signal, a clearer signal to the universe, and the
Mm-hmm.
universe will manifest more opportunities, more joy, more abundance, peace, harmony, all of that when we send out a clear signal of
Mm-hmm.
alignment and authenticity. I think something like I saw something recently that talked about like the vibration of alignment is even higher than the vibration of gratitude.
Oh, nice.
Don't quote me, that could be completely wrong,
I
but
think I've seen something about that too.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like the energy of alignment,
Mm-hmm.
think of it like,
Mm-hmm.
and the universe responds to our signal. If we're
Yeah.
sending out a signal of pain or discomfort or
Mm-hmm.
anger or like staticky signal,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to get staticky results.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, again, it's like being in integrity, right? Being on the wavelength with because there's not even any inner discord. Because I think that's the thing is we always focus on what frequency am I sending out, but what frequency are you creating internally first? And that getting
mhm,
that into alignment so that you're actually a clear channel. You're radiating a good radio signal, out into the world. So I'd love to wrap this up by asking, what's the light at the end of the tunnel? Like, what is so important about the follow through, about leaning in, doing the work? What's the payoff?
the payoff is you are going to live every day of your life happier, more peaceful, more joyous, more abundant, more free. It doesn't mean that bad things won't happen and you won't
Mhm.
have disappointments or hard times. It just means you are going to be living more vibrantly. Like imagine living at full capacity of your ability, of your energy, of your light. We all have light we emanate. We're here for a reason. And when we can bring that joy and that light wherever we go, whether it's in our work, whether it's in our relationships, whether it's just walking in the grocery store and we're beaming and smiling because we're so in alignment, and we smile at someone who's having a really rough day, that's light work and that makes a difference in the
Mhm.
world. And so what's on the other side of leaning in and doing the work is just feeling like you know who you are, you're comfortable with who you are. You don't let the assholes get you down. The things that you used to get upset about don't bother you as much anymore. It's like you're just a lot more even keel and in balance, and it's more just no matter what circumstance you find yourself in, you can always move through it with
Mhm.
balance and clarity, as opposed to being reactive, right? Whereas you're
Yeah.
just reacting and things are happening. You're just much more empowered. I mean, going through the world more empowered.
Yeah, we all want that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been absolutely a joy. I could talk to you for hours. And
Same.
congratulations again on the new book. I will put all the details below in the show notes so where you can grab your copy of The Reclamation, the 6 stages of masculine awakening. And where can people find out more about your work and other things that you get up to, Erica?
My website is probably just the simplest way. I do have a YouTube channel, but I'd say my website, erikaelmuts.com.
Great.
I'm sporadically on social media, so you can find me on the social media platforms here and there. So, but yeah, my website's probably the best
Perfect. And I'll
place
make sure
where everything is there.
all those details are below too. And again, thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to
Well,
talking to you again soon.
thank you for inviting me, Kate. It was lovely to see you.